Okay, I got you right as you're drinking. Ha! That'll learn you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
All
Um,
good.
hi everybody. It's I don't know. It's after hours. No, it's not after. It's after dinner for everybody involved in this chat. So thanks for joining, and appreciate that. They know who I am. Can you tell us about who you are? Like, and you know,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
do you
sure.
do?
So I'm Eric Haag. I am a senior solutions engineer at Gradle. So I work with our commercial product, Develocity. Maybe you've heard of it as Gradle Enterprise. Recently was renamed to Develocity. So I get to kind of work with a lot of really cool customers, a lot of different companies, and also get to work with the open source community as well. I'm actually pretty close to a couple of the folks on the Spring team, and just get to work on their builds and help out the Spring team be productive.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think people on the show have probably heard me talk about this before, but Spring Boot uses the velocity happily. We're very very grateful, not compatriots. I don't know for I think yeah, we're users, very very happy users of the technology. So can you tell? I mean, I can try. I'll start. How about this? I'll start. There's
Yeah.
once upon a time in a land far, far away, we decided to cache our dependencies, and so there's this idea of like Maven Central, which is like a global repository for everybody, but that's not going to cut it if you have like your organizational private bits. You don't want that out there in the open intertube. So people have their own artifact repository, which is nice because you get some whole world optimizations that you couldn't get if you just kept on using local M2 repositories. But there's just so much more to managing an artifact and its life cycle than just storing the bits for the jar. And so then you get into the really interesting opportunities implied by something like the velocity.
Develocity.
Yeah. So is it? Did I screw it up? Did I miss anything?
Well, so
What did I miss?
that's part of it, right? That's what you're describing is more of like a dependency cache, right? Or an artifact repository. So Develocity is it's actually a lot of different things. It wears a lot of different hats. So it can be kind of hard to conceptualize, but one of the main driving features is the build cache. So build cache is different than like a dependency cache or artifact repository. A build cache actually stores outputs of the intermediate steps to get to that artifact, right? So, for example, your compile Java.
Mhm.
So when you're compiling Java code, I mean that's a very well defined and hopefully deterministic process.
Right.
So as long as you're not making any changes to your source files, changing dependencies around, you should get the same compiled code.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the time of day that you're running it, right, or the day of the week or the phase of the moon. You should get the same exact outputs, right? And so we kind of take that and we build what's called or offer what's called a build cache. And so
Yeah.
you actually store those intermediate steps, the things that get you to that assembled artifact. Um, so maybe compile takes 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
If if you already know the result of that compile job, then then you can just pull it directly from the build cache. You don't have to spend 2 minutes compiling, right?
Yeah.
So it can really speed up builds.
And so it's a plugin that exists for the everyday user. It's going to be a plugin in their Gradle, or very importantly, Maven, um, or maybe even SBT. And I guess you don't really care, right? You're just trying to help people get builds better. So it's a plugin in that thing that then offers it has a visibility into your build, and so it can, in cooperation with this Develocity service, which you host it on-prem, or is it just in the cloud?
It's actually entirely on prem. So
Okay.
we don't yet offer any sort of like hosted or cloud service. Yeah.
Nice. And so in cooperation with that, it can cache, like you say, the intermediate steps of a build, but there's other things that are a little bit more like unit test runs. Maybe it can help me avoid running things that need not be rerun, which is there's a dependency graph problem there that seems really complicated that I personally don't want to spend the time to optimize my build to figure out, but I'm glad it would make me sleep better if I thought there were people at Gradle doing that work for me. Is that something that they do, or?
Yeah, and you kind of touched on one point, right? Like, it's not just compilation. You can do the same thing for tests. As long as you don't have uh, non-deterministic tests or flaky tests,
Mhm.
you can cache those as well. And yeah, so it's more about actually the other half of Develocity, I'd say, would be the build insights, build analytics, and troubleshooting. So when you do have things that go wrong in your build, um, Develocity gives you a report of, well, we call it a build scan. So it just has a lot of different information in there about your build, what ran, test outcomes, dependencies. And it puts it all in this really nice web web-based report, right? So we kind of empower you to or give you the tools to
Yeah.
better visualize and troubleshoot your build.
Now, I know for the Spring team, it's like I don't what. Do you remember the numbers? It's like half an hour on every build or something like that. Some
Uh,
crazy like it's I could be
it's
I
something
could be
like that.
understating the numbers, you know.
Actually, so it actually would be very easy to check. I can do it right now.
Yeah, please.
So,
You look that up, and oh, do you have it already?
in 10
Seconds.
seconds, I will.
Femtoseconds. In
So,
the meantime, for people who are wondering, we use it. We had a Maven-based build, and we moved to Gradle. Already some benefit. We moved to the Gradle build tool. This is years ago. This has got to be like 5 years ago now, right? Uh, but Spring Boot started off as a Maven project, and it's since Spring Boot's grown by definition, and we moved to Gradle, which allowed us to be a little bit smarter and to customize some of the plugins, all that kind of stuff. But then we got in Gradle Enterprise then, and now at the Velocity today, it's the same thing, right? And it's ridiculous. I mean, really, really, really incredible. What you sent me a link, right? What does that link say?
yeah,
Um,
so if you open that,
uh,
it'll show you right there at the top left. Build
yeah,
time is
31
31
minutes.
minutes and 16 seconds.
That's the
But
average build. Or is that just the most recent one?
so that's the average build over the last
7 days.
7 days.
Yeah.
That is all Spring Boot builds on CI. But
Right.
the thing to pay attention to there is the avoidance savings. So the avoidance savings is actually how much time is being avoided as a result of, well, a couple different things, but mainly the build cache. And that, so I will say that is a serial number. So it's an hour and 22 minutes. I guess
Yeah.
not everyone can see it. So an hour and 22 minutes, but your build is running in parallel. So that is probably closer to maybe 30 minutes. Yeah. So probably shaving the build right in half. And there
Yeah.
could be some more things there that we could optimize for
That's
sure.
the full build, people. That's not just like, oh, let's just do the tests quickly. That's everything. That's the build, and it's an hour or so plus without this, and you just plug it in, and it's that. It blows my mind. Um, yeah, we're not the only people in the world who use it, but we're fans. Hey, I just mentioned SPT, and apparently the build avoidance numbers savings are not available in SPT. So I'm right that SPT is supported, just not with that one little tiny feature. But yeah,
Yes.
just incredible.
So, yeah. And I think that's worth noting as well. Develocity, we are Gradle, obviously the people behind the open source Gradle build tool, of course. But Devlocity, actually we have feature parity for Maven.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
everything that we offer for Gradle, we have feature parity for Maven. It works just as well. SBT and actually Bazel are kind of early on. We're not quite there yet with feature parity. So yeah, there could be some things in there that aren't quite fully featured yet.
Okay. This brings us to a very important question. Just in case, like I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat, worried that I've got it wrong. Do you pronounce it Gradle, or, as my friend from Singapore delights in suggesting to troll me, is it more like Gradle or Gradle?
Gradle.
Okay,
Yes.
it's only been like
Gradle.
15 years of me hearing that.
Mm-hmm. Gradle.
Like,
But it does bring up, we've gotten that question before at conferences about the Gradle wrapper, right? So
yeah,
you have in your well, if you're using Gradle, right, you have the Gradle wrapper that's usually checked into your repo, and that's how you invoke Gradle. You never invoke the binary directly.
sure.
And so the Gradle wrapper is Gradle W, right? So how do you say that? So if you
Oh,
actually say Gradle
Gradle.
W, so that's one way, Gradlu. Gradle W is actually longer than just saying Gradle wrapper, right? There's more syllables
Oh
in
my
Gradle
goodness.
W than just saying Gradle wrapper.
What have you
So
wrought wrong?
so so completely yeah, kind of backwards, but yeah, just thought that was kind of interesting.
That is actually really great. I didn't realize that. Um, so I'll go ahead and say it then. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. In terms of the length of your command line tools, MVNW is shorter.
It is.
There, see,
True.
this is an equal size podcast. Okay, we don't take favorites.
Of course.
Yeah. No.
Maybe you can rename it to GW or something. Actually, I
Yeah.
do think there's a utility that someone has written that shortens it to
Just alias
GW.
it. Yeah. I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
tab completion in every modern operating system? I just. Okay. So I'm a big fan. Obviously, I've talked about my. There's something deliriously nice about the way it does multi-module builds.
Mm-hmm.
Not particularly well documented, as far as I could find, but super satisfying to get a Gradle build going, right? Because it's just, you breathe and there's like one line of code per module or something like that, and then it's a build, as opposed to, well, the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I'm a big fan. And then what's the plugin look like for Velocity these days? Is it particularly onerous? Is it just like one liner as well? The introduction to the build.
It's very close to being one line. So it is a settings plugin. Right. So you have the settings.gradle file or .kts, settings.gradle.kts file. And you also have,
Kotlin.
yeah, Kotlin, of course. So, and then you also have the build files, build.gradle, build.gradle.kts. Well, you may be used to applying plugins to your build files. The Develocity plugin is applied to the settings file, which is essentially applying something globally to the whole build, not just a single Gradle subproject, but applying something globally to the whole build.
Is that like
So
all
it
projects?
is no. So yeah, well, yeah. So it applies it to essentially, I mean, the whole project, right? It just so any Gradle command that you run, Gradle task that you run, you're gonna get the features of Develocity. You'll get the build scan. You'll get the build caching. And yeah, so it's just a settings plugin. And then the only other thing that you would need to configure would be your Develocity server URL. So for Spring, it's just ge.spring.io.
So you configure it in one place, and then you specify a URL even where you do configure it.
Yeah, so right, so it's it's just a little bit of extra configuration in the settings.gradle file. It's just a devvelocity block, and then you just configure the URL to your server.
But am I right in saying that that's the only place you have to worry about it? Like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So you one file, and only there are just a few lines of, you know. Okay, yeah. So it's so then, and I noticed that you when the build runs, you even get a URL dumped into the console, right? Telling you where you can go visit it, and so you can audit it. It even has suggestions on how to better the build, right? So it's like having a on staff build engineer who works
exactly, right.
remotely.
So yeah, so that's the build scan. So for every Gradle invocation or Maven or SPT or Bazel, right? Any of those, you get a build scan at the end of the build. And yeah, it's just a URL. It's just with like a randomly generated path, right? And so it's a unique immutable record of everything that happened in the build. And yeah, right. You can get all sorts of details in there. Things that are just really hard to see. I mean, when you're running a build, as it's running, you really don't have a whole lot to go on to understand what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe you see some console output, right? And that's really all that you see.
Yeah.
But there's so much that's going on there, right? You're resolving dependencies. You're running tests, right? So the build scan just kind of puts that all into right. It tells you how long you're spending downloading dependencies. So yeah, I mean maybe your build takes 10 minutes and 9 minutes of it is downloading dependencies. Maybe you should look into a dependency cache, kind of what we started talking about, right? Yeah, all sorts of uh, things that it can help surface and opportunities to optimize your build.
Speaking of telemetry, it sounds like you're exposing or surfacing the telemetry related to the build. Do you actually just looking for an opportunity to cross streams here? Do you publish those metrics anywhere? Like, could it be you? Can I use Micrometer or something like that to get information about the build time and all that, and publish it to Prometheus or something?
Sure. So what we do have is we do have a REST API. So you can yeah, right. So you can use anything that's in the build scanner, or most of the things that are in the build scan, right? You can query through the REST API. So yeah, with that, right, you can do whatever it is that you like. Actually, so in our most recent release of Develocity, 2024.1, we officially released what we call Develocity reporting and visualization. So it's kind of a mouthful, right? So we just refer to it as DRV.
Oh yeah, I like
So
that much better.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Um, Yeah, so what that does actually is it exports the scans in real time to Amazon S3, and then you can put a layer on top of that, connect that to Amazon Athena, which allows you to actually write SQL against the build data. So you can query it just as if it was a database. And then taking that one step further, we actually put we built Grafana dashboards, so you can actually see all sorts of different cross build aggregates, right? So not just um, a single build, right? So Develocity does have some cross reporting, but it kind of got to the point where customers wanted to see all sorts of different things, right? That there's so many different use cases for wanting to understand different aspects of the build, and so you can't just build that all into the product. So we exposed this Develocity reporting and visualization to kind
Yeah.
of make it a lot more easy for people to build their own dashboards. yeah, it's really cool. There's actually so much in there that that even I'm surprised to see, like just different things that you can surface.
And again, it is. I don't mean to look. I don't know anything, but I'll tell you, I'm 40, and I remember a time when like it's still a thing, but having a build engineer was a full time, and is still, if you're not using a good tool, it's a full time job. It's a discipline. It's a thing that people
Mm-hmm.
think about for years before they get good at it. It's not one of those things where like, oh, I'll take a weekend course and get great at it tomorrow. And so what you're saying is you found a way to like give you the 80%. You are like like you remind. I don't know how to make this comparison. You remind me of Grammarly. Uh,
Okay.
I self-published the book, and I used Grammarly to get most of the editing
Mm-hmm.
on that
Mm-hmm.
book done. I'm not saying there's not a room for a qualified editor at the end of the process. I'm not saying there isn't room for that. I'm just saying I got most of the value of that editor. Not everything, surely not everything, but most of it, just by using Grammarly, which is really, really nice. And then
Yeah.
same thing here. The Velocity sounds like a very cheap, you know, alternative to hiring a team, and which is a luxury that's a little bit very. First of all, it's expensive, and second of all, it's a luxury very few organizations can afford. So just I want build engineer as a service, and it sounds like that's what you're proffering, which sounds good to me.
Absolutely. In a way, right? So I do think that's a good it's a good comparison. Um, and I mean builds can be very complex pieces of software, like very just as your production code. I mean, it is it's critical when things aren't working right. It's just the build. You don't think about it as well. It's not a deliverable, right? But it's just as important,
Yeah,
because when things are going correctly, I mean that's going to stop everything. It's going to halt making hot fixes, right? Like releasing new features. So yeah, we started Gradle started as um, started consulting. That's kind of where we started, like our roots, right? Well, of course the Gradle build tool, but then we would do consulting and go on site and help people optimize their builds, right?
yeah,
So you had actual Gradle engineers, people that were building the build tool, go on site and optimize your builds, right?
yeah.
But what we found was 6 months later, their build would be slow again. And so then we'd have to go back, and right, it was just this. It wasn't scalable.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we worked on Gradle Enterprise at the time, now Develocity, was kind of the answer to that. It was you know making it a lot easier and making the build a lot more approachable. Kind of the whole shift left thing, right? Like you don't need, like you're saying, you maybe don't need a whole full-time position. I mean, I think there's still value in having a team that does that is responsible for the build.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
But you're able to take a lot of load off of them and empower your developers to fix fix the build themselves.
Right. Yeah, because the surface area is smaller, and the levers they can control result in changes that are interesting to make. Um, so okay, I'm a big fan, huge fan. The Spring Team, big fan. Fans? Are we? It's a collective now, right? So we're
Yeah.
fans. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. We're all good. And Gradle, obviously. I don't think we don't need to explain that. Obviously, I think half of Spring projects are using Gradle, roughly something like that. It's a ubiquitous uptake, considering just a minute ago it was like not half, much less.
Mm-hmm.
And then and so I'm in the company itself, you make money off Gradle Enterprise. I think that's like the one of the main vectors of growth for Gradle. So I'm a big believer in like, yeah, go buy Develocity. Go buy Develocity. It's it supports a tool that we all use. So please, and
Yeah, yeah.
plus it's really useful. Um, what is can we turn? Let's turn the corner here. Can we talk about you a little bit? Like you sounded like you've been there for a while. How long have you been at Gradle?
2 years.
Okay. So you were there
Maybe not a
before.
while.
What?
Maybe not a while, but
Well, yeah, it's still a while. I mean, 2 years in software is 1,000 years in dog
that's
years.
true. That's true.
Yeah. But either way, I think you precede the Develocity name change, the moniker change,
Yes.
just barely, but yeah. Um, so what drove you to that? Like, why do that instead of I don't know. I have no idea. What was your
Yeah.
Were you a build engineer before, or were you just really burdened by the work of being a build engineer?
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, no. I mean, I was working on, well, I mean, I used Spring Boot in my day to day, building
Hey,
microservices and things like that. But I did kind of have a passion for the build side. And sometimes,
you know
I'd
why?
even get,
It's
why?
because the production side with Spring Boot was so easy. I'm gonna make that build better. Okay, good. I'm just gonna
There you
assume that's what it was.
go. So, yeah, but I would get frustrated sometimes at the build, and
There.
especially if it was something that I was kind of pulled into.
Yeah.
Right? You shouldn't have to fight against your build to get it to do what you want. Like you should love your build, right? You should treat it with respect, and but I would, I was doing a little bit of consulting, and the build for or there was a build that I was working on that, yeah, it used Gradle, but in the CI pipeline, it also had Python scripts, and then it also had JavaScript and Node stuff, and I just couldn't wrap my head around like why do we need all this? What is it doing? It was just tooling that people built, but you can do all of that in Gradle, and more, right? Like you can write your own tasks to do things. You just kind of have to you have to spend a little bit of time learning it, but
Right.
you totally can, right? And so it saves people. I mean, how do you recreate your build on CI locally when you have all of these things like Python and JavaScript and like Ruby? You're doing all these things. You have all these dependencies. How can you ever run that reliably locally? So I just kind of started to get kind of a passion for this, and yeah, decided to join Gradle is a little bit of a different um, position for me, is a lot more people facing.
Right.
Something that I wasn't used to as a software developer, right? I'm always backstage in the trenches. But it was a really interesting change for me.
This is how I met you, by the way. At least the first time I remember. Look, I think we might have talked before on the inner tubes on uh, our communities, but not the first time I think we actually pressed flesh. Met in person was at Spring IO this year. And you were at the booth, like helping people build better. It was awesome. It was and I think we had a bit of a conversation before you reminded me with whom I was talking, because we had connected electronically, on the inner tubes prior to that. So yeah, you're really good at it. You're a natural. Um,
Thank you.
no, thank you. That's what I'm saying. That's why we're having this conversation, because I was just so happy to have I, Hans doesn't employ uh, people who can't make the case for the technology, obviously, but you're a credit. We got a question here, not related to senior types such as yourself, but maybe you could speak to it. Why is it so hard for a beginner to break into the industry right now? And I'm going to add right now, because it's always been hard a little bit, but I think it's really hard right now.
I mean, I think there could be so many different variables there. I think it's hard to point at one specific thing.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, you have um, COVID-19. Of course, like that was huge. Had a huge impact on everybody's day to day. I mean, I was in an office
And you
5 days a
weren't.
week, and then I wasn't, and I'm still not. But now some people are going back. But then now companies are doing layoffs, right? So in huge amounts, and so of course it's going to be hard to kind of get in to the industry when so many are being laid off and let go from their jobs in huge numbers.
Yeah. It's not great. Um, like how long have you been in the industry?
I'd say 9 years now.
Yeah, so you predate by a long stretch the current malaise
Hmm.
in the ecosystem, and I don't know. Would you? I mean, you've seen a cycle or two, right? You got in just after the 2008 housing crisis, which was bad, and
Yeah, well, about 2015
so
was
a bit out,
when
a bit
that's
later.
that's yeah, it's hard to believe that 2015 was 9 years ago. It does feel like 2008.
Oh wow, yeah, okay. Well, I got in 2002, right after the .com crash.
Hmm.
Right, we had the .com boom and then bust, and like I was working at a Starbucks, and that was my first job doing anything. I did side projects. I was doing like software for people, like little projects here and there. But 2002, I was at a Starbucks, and I finally broke in. And this was right after the .com. It was in the middle of the .com bust. Websites that were making $1 billion valuation 3 years earlier were gone, just extinct. And nobody could get it. I mean, I remember like studying software in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I remember being out there thinking, oh, I would love to get in this industry. And I hear these ridiculous stories about halfway morons that were out there like, oh, I built this website using Microsoft front page. It's just front page. It's just an HTML page. There's no back end, nothing. It's just some HTML, not even particularly great HTML. It had like the blink tag and whatever, charging $100,000, and getting it, commanding these incredible wages. Anybody who could help you establish your digital storefront was going to be, have a great time. And then it crashed, as it inevitably would have, as it should have almost, because we were high on hype and all that, but we never delivered. I mean, some things delivered, but basically it was really bad. But on the other hand, the organizations that during that time built themselves runway as opposed to building bigger for their organization. Like if you were in that hype cycle and you were like saying, okay, I know this isn't real, and I'm gonna sock away money and I'll come out the other side. Those companies that learned from that really benefited. So Google, Amazon, these are two companies that came out of that hype cycle much stronger for it. They were small, scrappy startups in the beginning. They came out of it like as the senior leaders of the ecosystem. The senior grandfathered, grandmothered organizations, and then fast forward 2008, and it's not the software cycle, it's not the software ecosystem that's caused the issues. It's the subprime mortgages and all that. But again, it has a devastating impact on banks and liquidity and interest rates, all of which affect the ability to loan. And if you're a startup, that's your currency is interest. Your currency. If you want to survive, your goal is to borrow money for cheaper than it costs to lose it, and then just keep doing that until you can cash out, whatever that eventuality is. And cashing out might be an IPO, it might be being acquired, whatever. So then 2008, again, so many people lost their jobs. They lost their shirt on software. And but in between, things were great. I joined and I was making next to nothing. I was making $27,000 working in software in 2002. And I was glad to have it, right? But I knew people who were my age or younger who were making 100,000 just 2 years earlier. not exactly my age, but my peer group, and they were doing really well. Me, and I was just like, I'm in, and it reminds me of that joke that I always tell people, which is uh, this guy's working at the circus, and he's a disgruntled, old, belligerent guy, and he's just every day his job is just to clean elephant dung. Every day he's just obsessively cleaning elephant dung. He just has to clean the elephant dung and then sweep it and bale it and dispose of it, right? Every day. And he's working there for 30 years. He's just belligerent, unhappy, hates everything about his life, complains, curses to no end. But that's what he does. He cleans elephant dung. And eventually somebody comes up to him and says, hey, if you hate it so much, why don't you just quit? And he says, what? Leave show business, right? And I feel like that's sort of where I was. I didn't want to leave show business. I wanted to be in show business. I didn't care if it was $27,000 and elephant dung. Like I was using PHP.
Are you comparing using PHP to scooping elephant dung?
No, dung being used as fertilizer. It's very useful.
It's true.
God, yeah. No. But no, they're both smelly. So there's that. And I was using PHP, and I didn't care. I was like, I'm in. But it took a long time to sort of see gains on that, to appreciate value on that. That investment was hard. So it's, I guess what I'm trying to say is I've been through now 3 cycle resets, and these are horrible. They're horrible, and they're more horrible for the younger people. They're always more difficult for the youngest, who are and awkwardly the lifeblood, the most important. Paradoxically, the people that we seem so quick to like shed are also the most important, because without them there is no future. Like, why are we so blind? Short-sighted. Yeah, it was just, I don't know, my friend. The answer is, why is it so hard to break into the industry? I don't know, but I know it'll get better. And I know it right now. It has to do with, you can hear people talk about interest rates, and some people are talking about AI, although I don't think that's all that much of an issue. I think it's just really interest rates. I think it's just these large organizations have lost their ability to borrow as cheaply as they have, and large organizations sometimes get greedy and they take it out on the people that really can't afford it. So just hang on tight. It'll get better, probably, most likely, as far as I've seen. I'm not a scientist or a mind reader or future reader, but keep going. Don't give up. The industry needs you more than you need the industry. Always remember that, right? Great engineers are out there, and they, I don't know why this industry is so slow to find them, to welcome them, to open up arms to them, but we definitely need you. So please don't give up. Okay, so that was one question. I don't know. Back to the topic here. What's new? What's on the horizon? The spring team. I'm not asking as a member of the spring team. I'm sure they're well apprised of all the latest and greatest, but just telling me, what's the latest and greatest? What's the stuff that to which developers should look forward for both the build tool and Develocity?
Yeah, a lot of things on the horizon, right? So really, the big thing for Develocity this year is really just it's all about the data and exposing the data, enhancing the API, making it a lot easier to build out custom reports and just integrations and all that, right? It's very important. I mean, Develocity is sitting on a lot of really interesting data. I mean, your build data can tell you so much, and just exposing that and getting that out there in the world. Well, not out in the world, but within your organization can be a really powerful thing. So that's really the big focus right now for Develocity. For the Gradle build tool, it's all about right now the road to Gradle 9. So there's a lot of
thing. What's that?
I just mean Gradle 9.0, right?
Yeah, but
So we're
what are
on.
the features? What's how?
I'll start by saying so Gradle build tool does have a public roadmap. You can just Google Gradle build tool, well, public roadmap, and it's a GitHub board. But there's a lot of really cool things on there. Some of my favorite things, or things that I'm looking forward to as a developer, not just as a Gradle employee, but as a developer, are declarative Gradle. So I'm not sure if you've heard of that yet, but it's
Is that? But I
so
thought Gradle's already declarative.
it is, and well, it can be, but also Gradle, uh, I'd say one of its main, something that makes it so powerful is your ability to I mean really do anything that you want. But I think that's also its biggest setback, right? In a
Yeah.
build file, I mean you can make HTTP calls. You can
Yeah.
spin up databases,
It's too
right?
incomplete. Yeah.
Exactly. So the declarative Gradle project is kind of trying to rework the syntax in a way that makes it more approachable, I think, to um, developers, and makes it easier to write the build files, it restricts the syntax just a little bit so that you can't do as many of those things that often lead you to shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak. Um, so that's one of the big things. And when you have something that's declarative, it also makes it a lot easier for tools to integrate. So IDE support, being able to read something that is declarative and can be translated one to one to like structured data, structured, like JSON, for
Right.
example, makes the IDE integration a lot better. So with Maven, I mean, it's all defined in XML files.
Right.
So it's really easy for an IDE to parse that. But for a Gradle build file, as it exists today, right? Like I said, you can do all sorts of things. It's
Yeah.
Turing complete, right? So how does an IDE can't just parse a Gradle build file, and that makes it sometimes the integration a little bit not as good as it could be. So I'm really looking forward to that. And another thing that I'm looking forward to would be the isolated projects in Gradle. So right now, yeah, the declarative build process. I love it too. So isolated projects
Yeah.
is a way to really break down or allow the build to process parts of the build at a time. So when you have like a monorepo, right, and you have many different projects in it. So as it exists today, if you invoke a task, let's say you have 100 projects.
Right.
When you invoke a task in one of those projects, Gradle has to evaluate the build files of all 100 projects, which even if it only really needs to evaluate one of them, and because you can do all sorts of things in Gradle, like configure one project from another project. So you can't just look at a build file and say, "Oh, I know exactly what the build is doing," because you can configure project A from project B. Um, so isolated projects is yet kind of another way to restrict that, and make it so that you can't do that, and which allows us to make a lot of different performance optimizations, like only being able to look at a single build file and knowing exactly what you're going to get, right?
Wow. It's like, again, once the build, this is I take it back. You're not just Grammarly. Maybe you're like Apple. You have the vertical control of the build. You've got the cloud solution and the client solution, and so you can do these whole world optimizations that Maven. I mean, in theory, if somebody were to take advantage of it, but it's just natural here. Very, very cool. That kind of stuff is really cool. Can't wait to see this in the future. When we say the future, what are we talking about here? Don't give me exact timelines. I'm sure you can, but next decade, next year, next week, what are we looking at?
Definitely not next week. Probably not next month. So I mean, I can't say I believe, and I'm only speaking from memory here. So, but you can look at the Gradle public roadmap, and I want to say isolated projects is targeted for sometime this year, though it is August now, so it's it's quickly approaching. But and declarative Gradle is another big focus. It definitely, as far as I know, isn't going to be feature complete by the end of the year, but we are targeting to have something available, at least covering some use cases, but maybe not all use cases for different types of projects.
Nice. Oh, I can't wait. This is really good because it's the last. It's ironic. We have Maven. It is a declarative tool, and yet it's still infinitely more verbose. So I would hate to cede that incredible gain in reduction of verbosity that you get by using Gradle. But now I can but I also lost that declarative nature, so I can now have my declarative cake and eat it too. With
That's
what you're
exactly
talking about.
right.
Super, super good. I'm excited. This has been great. I feel better about the future. I appreciate everything y'all are doing over there on the Big Gradle Ranch. Thank you for that. Winding down here, are you on the internet? And do you want to be found? And if so, where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. So I do have a Twitter. I don't, or sorry, X.
Oh, is that?
I I don't check it very often, but I mean, feel free. It's just Eric Haag Dev, ERICHAAG DEV. It's the same as my GitHub, so that's another way to reach me. Eric Haag Dev, and I also have a website, my personal blog, erichaag.dev.
Lucky. Okay, here we go. Well, thank you. I've just put that there. Awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks, Eric. It was really great to talk to you. Thanks for a great conversation. Appreciate you. Thanks everybody else who joined us today. Hope you had fun. It was great. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.